Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on back to the channel. Hope that you're doing well and having a great one out there. Today, we're going to listen to Photopsis. Photopsis. Also has the title of Prelude for Large Orchestra. We're going to listen to this composition by Bernd Alois Zimmermann, which was composed in 1968. I pulled up some information here. We're listening to this because it was suggested and sponsored by Alan. Thank you so much, Alan, for the suggestion and for the support. I've never heard of Mr. Zimmermann. I've never heard of photopsis. Anyways, I got it pulled up here. Let's go ahead. Let's just go ahead and give it a listen. We'll talk about it after, and I'll try not to stumble over my title pronunciations as we go forward. Alan did warn there were some jump scares in here. I like that quick vibrato on the flute. Kind of heard there. That flutter. It sounds like the soundtrack to like a tense moment in a scene. But not overly horrific or anything. I'm waiting for it. I like how it sounded like tubas kind of held that drone right here. make for good background music for reading like a mystery novel. It's funny how these little moments of like almost this light kind of daydreaming transition, like right there, like it sounds like a harp. Right. It almost got me. Drums have settled into this rhythm alongside this big horn. It's slow, but it has a rhythm. Until it comes back, it's harsh. It sounds very Twilight Zone-ish to me. I love how this is like such a kind of beautiful settling of ashes after the destruction of what happened previously. It's like the atoms and everything trying to like bring themselves back together and reform. This kind of reminds me of like Gustav Holst a little bit, in some ways. Interesting technique how that kind of fades in quickly there. Okay, hear me out because I have a few things to say about this particular piece of music. I think that when it comes to this type of, experimental, classical-esque, whatever the genre or the era, whatever it might be, I think that this might be one of the most accessible pieces in that particular direction. Because hear me out. There wasn't anything in here, to me, that sounded overly dissonant, overly experimental, overly whatever, difficult just for the sake of being difficult. I'm not saying there wasn't any difficulty or no experimentation happening in here. There clearly is. But it didn't seem as overt, perhaps. There's another word I wanted to say, but I don't know it just yet. Listening to this, I kind of heard 4 different sections, basically. The first build-up was a little experimental, but still kind of keeping into the quiet corners, kind of almost like seeing little bits of light in the shadows, like it would just kind of peek through. And then eventually that part, of course, expanded and exploded into that first just absolute mountain of cluttered chaos, and the timpani and the drums crashing in. These sounds going on are just beating you over. And then it snaps and comes back down to the third part. And the third part is actually like what I find most interesting in this track. Because that third part, in the lull, in the quiet, in the plains, in the fields, it began to kind of recreate itself from the ashes. It was kind of coming back from the destructive fires of that explosion. And now it was just kind of little bits of atoms popping off here and there, coming back to life. The phoenix having to build itself back together feather by feather. That's what I was hearing in that third part. And in that section, to me, it was actually quite beautiful. It was melodies coming together, jumping on top of one another, creating a harmony, and then building on and on from there. And I thought that third part kind of gave a lot of credit and kind of gave a lot of context to the first two, to how it kind of started off in that first half. The third part really kind of justified, to an extent, that first half, which was really cool how that was done. And then, from all that beauty, it of course climbs the mountain, pushing the rock up Sisyphus style, and it explodes even harder, even faster than the first explosion. And of course, that tails us off to the ending of the track. And I just thought that the way it was actually structured and performed was just really, really well done. And in some capacity, really accessible as well, I would say. And can I tell you, I can't speak for you. One thing, I tried making some comments while the piece was going. I'm just pulling up YouTube on a different tab so I can show you some things that were going through my mind. Some parts of this, especially obviously as it got to the more climactic moments, reminded me a lot in some capacity of Gustav Holst with the planets. Obviously, that's a kind of different sound, but it reminded me of taking some of those sounds and just making them a little bit more experimental in their own way. I couldn't help but think that as it was going. And then, can I tell you, the music here sounded a lot to me like kind of sci-fi in some ways, but not to the point of going in like a horror kind of direction, but just kind of a mysteriousness to it. So there's a couple. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna see if I can find some things. There's a couple images that came to my mind, and I just want to see if so like, can I tell you? Maybe not as horrifying. Maybe, like I said, there's just something about it. Like, it kind of felt tense to me, but in a spacey way. Like, I'm muting something, and I'm going to play the music here really quick. But I want to play specifically this part. Pull up this. It kind of reminded me of, like, being in space and a spacewalk. There's a beauty to it, but there's this tension, man. Like, there's this deep tension that's lurking beneath this beauty. I think I went too far. I wanted to choose more of like the beautiful section before these horns start coming in. But like, I don't know what it was, but I was really getting that feeling during that section. You know, more, whoa, that's too far. More like in here, like there's a loneliness, there's a solitude. And then, let me close that. If you guys have ever been here to Hollywood Studios, Disney, you may have been on the Tower of Terror ride, which is, of course, based off of like Twilight Zone and such. And can I tell you, that ride has a very certain atmosphere. And although I've never seen Twilight Zone, they definitely did a fantastic job creating a certain atmosphere to it, right? Like, so the music reminds me of the ride at Twilight Zone. I know it's very specific, like what I'm saying, like this kind of atmosphere, the voiceover. Like, it's just really cool. This ride is really cool. Like, all this that's happening. If I could... Listen, you're here with me. The music, let's mute this. Or at least lower it a little bit. It kind of made me think of the ride and like the sections and stuff like that. It's really cool. I mean, now you're at the tower. Alright, so anyways. Alright. The point was, it just reminded me of like this kind of cosmic horror that's kind of lurking in the background, lurking behind the stars, what's behind the stars in some capacity. Okay. Let's look at some of the information here. Why don't we? Composed in 68, premiering in 69 here. The piece can be interpreted in its sections as both a soundscape composition and a collage. The work was commissioned by to mark its centenary. The title of the piece is taken from Greek and can be translated as Incidents of Light. Okay? It kind of makes sense with what I said of like some of the light things. Zimmermann described the connection to music as follows. In the prelude, this process refers to the changes in color surfaces as they occur due to the way light falls on them. Here in the realm of tone colors in the broadest sense, the inspiration for the composition came from the monochrome wall surfaces of the foyer in the music theater in Revier, Gelsenkirchen, in the design by Yves Klein. So I guess somehow inspired by how the light hits there. When the light hits the sponge reliefs, and that's photopsis. Okay. So sorry. Here's all the instruments here listed, of course. You have quite a lot of people involved here. The work has a three-part structure. The composition makes extensive use of quarter notes, double and flutter notes. I guess those flutter notes are what I'm hearing and what I'm describing when I hear like the tubas or the horns going like that kind of quick thing. That's what it seems like. In the first part, the entries of various instrument groups are placed over shimmering string soundscapes, while the structure undergoes a continuous increase in terms of instrumentation and dynamics, of course, until it's dominated by brass, organ, and percussion. And I do like how the organ, if you listen to it, to me plays in that kind of starry pattern, like da da da, like a kind of cascade there in the background, which adds a lot to the atmosphere of it all. The beginning of the fourth movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony marks the transition to the second part, which collages musical quotations from different eras. That's kind of interesting. And here's a list of all those different quotations. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of a nice throwback and a callback to these pieces. The transition to the third section is almost seamless, swelling ever more intensely in its crescendo-like progression, oscillating and gradually encompassing the entire orchestra. And it goes on in there. Ends abruptly in a twitching, flickering final sound. And I had pulled up the actual discography here, or the Discogs page regarding this. I think that was kind of cool. And like I said, I think that for what this is, it's a kind of cool and in its own way accessible point of entry for the genre. Let me know what you guys thought of it, of course, in the comments down below. If you've been on the Tower of Terror ride, the part before it gets the elevator drop, doesn't the music feel like it could really fit in that particular space? I think it really could. Thank you again, Alan, for the sponsorship. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later. Bye.